with the airplane. I have a world of information to learn myself, but also to send my students to online. And whenever you have a question about something in the airplane, a system, a maneuver, anything like that, there's resources like the Cirrus portal and the IFOM, which is available on the iBook store, that lays out all of the information you need for the Cirrus aircraft. So when we're flying and we're talking about percent of power that we're using for a specific maneuver, or we're talking about an airspeed we're coming in on an instrument approach, that information comes directly from Cirrus through the IFOM. And it's my job and Nick's job and Aiden's job and every CSIP and TCI in the world's job to convey that information to you, but also to teach you where to find the information and where to access any new information you may need along your training in a Cirrus aircraft. So today, if you look right here, you can go to the Cirrus website and you can purchase an SR20 Transition. You would add it to your cart, and if you read the description, it's an instructor-led course for non-instrument rated pilots. That is an important fact about the normal transition, because later on, as you become instrument rated, as you learn how to fly the aircraft under instruments, you're going to be completing the advanced transition, which is a VFR and IFR transition for the airplane. And it's going to incorporate VFR maneuvers, instrument procedures, instrument approaches, holds, abnormal procedures. And the beauty about all of this is as you're completing the transition, you're gaining valuable flight time in the airplane and also valuable ground instruction from your CSIP or TCI. So if you look at flight time, it's a 9-hour estimate of how much flying you're going to be doing for this particular transition. Some people do it quicker, some people take more time. It depends on one, your skill level flying the airplane, how much experience you have, your proficiency doing the maneuvers that are listed in the transition, and then also the frequency of how long you fly. If you go a couple months in between your lessons, the stick and rudder skills and the muscle memory might have atrophied a little bit, forcing you to spend a little bit more time in the airplane. But that's okay. The more time you have in the airplane, the more comfortable you become with it and the safer and more proficient pilot you would become. So also bundled into this course, you can see that Cirrus has added some extra online courses. You have the SR20 systems course, the Perspective and Perspective Plus avionics course, our CAPS course, and our takeoff and landing course. The great thing about how Cirrus does this setup online is the same courses that I, Nick, and Aiden watched for our certifications through Cirrus Aircraft are the same courses that you're going to be watching when you're doing your transition with one of the authorized instructors. So the first step for the Cirrus transition is to purchase the course through Cirrus and find your local training center, CSIP and TCI, and add them as your instructor so we can access your portal. And you can see there's a transition course for all of the aircraft that Cirrus has ever made. I've done personally the Avidyne, Perspective, and Perspective Plus transitions. And when Cirrus one day adds a new avionics package and upgrades the Perspective Plus, which I don't even know how amazing that's going to be, we'll be doing that transition as well as CSIPs and TCIs. So once you complete the course and you add us as an instructor, we're going to be able to go to our instructor dashboard and see all of our students that we have. So I'm going to take Aiden right now, which was a TCI training that I did, which is similar to a transition. And I'm going to be able to see all of his transcripts and all of his information that we've gone through. And as we've finished as we finished our training, I can go in online via a website app or an iPad app, and I can go ahead and check off what we've completed and also put anything that we have not completed or something that you need to fix and get better with as we're flying. So if you're doing a maneuver and you're having trouble with a specific task, I can always defer the task to another day and we can try to get another time. Maybe go back and learn a little bit from the ground school if you're having trouble with the avionics and everything like that. So as you're completing your transitions, you can see that you have the CAPS course right here. You have your Perspective and Perspective Plus Avionics course right here, and as well as the Takeoff and Landings course. So as you're completing these videos, you're going to see the estimated time that's going to take you for your Welcome to Avionics and all the other sections for your airplane. So the reason why I chose the avionics videos is because this is what everyone who's transitioning from a Perspective and a Perspective Plus airplane is going to watch before, ideally, we get into the airplane. So you can see Hello Cockpit, behind the scenes, putting it all together. You're going to have 18 minutes of videos on the PFD, the MFD, the flight management system, and so on and so forth. So you can see this goes very in depth with our avionics packages that we have, as well as all of the other information, such as the takeoff and landings course and the maneuvers that you're doing. Something else that you would be doing within your transition is the workbook. And the workbook, I have it in my CSIP certification right here. So you can go here onto your portal. Yours would say transition right here. And then we're going to do the SR series workbook together as instructor and student. The idea is that as you're doing the workbook, you ask your instructor any questions they may have about the airplane. I've had a student who has gone through this workbook so meticulously, he found information that in one POH that was available, there was in the POH, and then another POH he had, the information was not in there. And, you know, as someone who's gone through this workbook multiple times with students, we sat down on Zoom recently and went through every single page of this workbook. I was actually blown away with how much, as a private pilot student, he understood about this airplane because he's gone through the Cirrus transition for the Perspective Plus SR20 as we've been doing his training. So you can see that this workbook covers all the ground knowledge that you need to know for your airplane. From the general section, as you go down, it goes all the way through to performance, weight and balance, supplemental information for the extra systems that aren't on all the airplanes, and it breaks it down per aircraft. You have the 20, 22, and 22 turbo. So if you're transitioning in SR20, you're going to be doing the information for the SR20 in this workbook. You're going to be doing an SR20 transition. But one day when you're ready to fly the SR22 or 22 turbo, you're going to go back and do the Cirrus transition for that specific airplane. The great thing is that the avionics in those airplanes are exactly the same from what's in the airplane you started off your transition with, if it's within the same generation. So the flying itself is only going to be the difference. So you can do a differences course if you're transitioning from an SR20 to an SR20 Perspective Plus, or, you know, turbo from a 22. There's a lot of information available, but you also need to as a student, go through these workbooks, watch the videos, stay on top of your home study, because the home study that Cirrus has provided for you is by far the best in general aviation. You're not going to get anything like this from Cessna. You're not going to get anything like this from Beechcraft. Mooney doesn't even exist anymore. So you're going to get this information and you're going to have to study it. And when you get in the airplane, it actually makes your transition a lot easier, because as you become familiar with it on the ground, you can go in and focus on the flying itself when you get into the airplane, and you're not looking for the direct enter button. You're not looking how to load an instrument approach, because you watch these videos, you've done the workbooks. The ground lesson that you do to start the transition is going to be second nature to you because you did the self-study at home. So as you're transitioning, if you're a licensed pilot already, it's just the same if you're learning to fly as a private pilot. When we're doing your private pilot's license, we're doing a transition as we're training you through all the maneuvers. So for our students like Mike Orlando, who's doing his private pilot's license with us, we're doing stalls, we're doing slow flight, we're doing steep turns, we're doing ground reference maneuvers. All of that is incorporated into the Cirrus transition for the SR20 and 22 and 22 turbo. So you might not be realizing it, but as we're doing our FAA training, we're also practicing the maneuvers that Cirrus wants you to be proficient in for their transition. So that's why I really believe in this Cirrus program because as you're training, even as a private pilot, before we have you go solo cross country, you're going to have a transition certificate in your hand that says you successfully completed the Cirrus SR20 Perspective Plus transition on this day. And a transition certificate enables you to do a lot. This is a transition I did with one of our students out in San Diego. You can see he did an SR22 Turbo Perspective Plus Advanced transition, and he finished it on November 14th. Scott was one of the best pilots I've ever worked with who was not a professional pilot, but it's because he studied every airplane he flew. And when he realized that he had the resources available to him that he does through the Cirrus program, I would get text messages from all times of the day asking me questions about this scenario. You know, when you're shooting a coupled approach, on what would you be doing with this? How would you set this up? And the best thing about it is I can refer him to the IFOM. I can go into the IFOM on my iPad and I can say, hey, this is the page that you need to go to. I can send him directly the page. Look at how this is set up. Look how they say it for setting the procedures up for this particular approach. Those are things that you need to be concerned about when you're flying airplanes, and having guidance and direct resources like Cirrus has is very similar to what a 121 airline would be doing with their pilots. There's a set of standard operating procedures. You learn the set of operating procedures, you fly with an instructor to become proficient in those operating procedures, and you operate that aircraft the same way as you would be flying with an instructor when you're solo, because the transition has put the expectations and the standards in place for you to fly the Cirrus aircraft safely, proficiently, and to Cirrus standards. So once you complete the Cirrus transition at Palomar Aviation, you get a transition certificate and you're in the Cirrus system. So if there's another training center, if you're on vacation and you want to go and fly, let's say out of Nassau Flyers in New York, instead of having to do a whole transition all over again that you would have to do with another type of company that doesn't have their guidance, you can take this transition certificate to another Cirrus training center, do one rental checkout for their insurance, and then you would be done with the transition in two different places. And that's the beauty about having the Cirrus transition. Also, if you're an airplane owner, a lot of the times these transition certificates give you a really good break on your insurance, but it's always good to keep learning. And there is a caveat to all this. Once you finish the transition, you're not done learning. If you know who Jason Shepard is from M0A, he always says a good pilot is always learning, and that is 100% true. So we're going to go back and we're going to make sure every 90 days you're proficient with your takeoff and landing. We're going to make sure that if you need some instrument currency, we're going to go up, and we're going to go back and we're going to redo the Cirrus transition. I might not be on my iPad swiping away saying they completed everything, but there are, recurrent checks that we're going to go through, and there are badges you can earn with your Cirrus transition that will enable you to become a safer and more proficient pilot. So it is a really great program that Cirrus has come up with and has implemented over the years. And we do have Chuck Calley with us, who is one of the training managers for Cirrus Aircraft. And Chuck has explained these programs to all of us at Palomar Aviation, and we've bought into it, and we've implemented exactly how Cirrus wants it to go and how they want us to do our training, because that's the right way to fly a Cirrus aircraft. Any pilot that is certified in the Cirrus is going to fly the airplane the same way through the standard operating procedures that you find with the IFOM and through the transition training. And we're going to be able to see where your skills are as a pilot, where your weaknesses are, and if there's anything that you really need to improve. And it goes really in depth. Something that you do on the Cirrus transition is no flap landings. Not many pilots practice no flap landings, but there are something that flap motors do burn out. It could be a thing that you need to do that one day. And if you don't know how to manage your energy appropriately, if you don't understand that the differences in airspeed on a no flap landing from the 20 to the 22 to the 22 turbo, you're going to either put yourself in a dangerous situation or you're not going to feel comfortable landing this airplane. A no flap landing for a private pilot should not be an emergency, but it could be a potentially hazardous situation if you do not understand the airplane. You do not understand how to fly these airplanes under abnormal procedures. So that's something that Cirrus aircraft covers in the transition. 50% flap landings, no flap landings. And Also something in terms of, or something that in addition to that, is how to make your decisions. That's where the CSIP comes in. Aeronautical decision making is something that you really need to focus on and learn how to make the appropriate decision through your personal minimums, through your personal limitations. And those do change over time. So something that we cover in the Cirrus Transition is how to define your personal minimums in Cirrus aircraft based off your skill experience, which is above and beyond what any other airplane manufacturer would go through. So I just realized that I'm not sharing the right screen for the certificate. So let me get back to that really quick. So this is what a Cirrus Transition certificate would look like. This is from one of our students in Palomar, and I apologize, I'm still getting used to the screen share on Zoom. But I'd like to give Nick and Aiden an opportunity to add in anything that they want to add in about the Cirrus Transition and stuff that they've noticed with students as they're teaching them that we should be really focusing on. And Nick, I know you're teaching a couple of students in the 22 Turbo, so as our students are transitioning from the 20, since you teach them both, what is something that they should be aware of that is different in the airplane and something that they really need to study extra on the portal for the transition?
Yeah, I mean, what I really like about the transition is, you know, on FAA check ride, I have 3 students who I have one who's, you know, a student pilot in the SR20 Turbo, takes his check ride next week. And one of the things that I really like about the transition is that the systems course in that transition, he will have the opportunity to go through that himself and look at all these systems and then come to me and ask any questions that he has regarding the Perspective Plus avionics package. So that's like one of the neat advantages of the transition is he doesn't have to hear, you know, in a one-on-one ground session. He can go do a self-study and, you know, listen to it as many times as he needs to understand the systems of this aircraft. So that's one of the advantages of the perspective, or of the transition rather.
Right, and your student that you're talking about, when I flew with him when I was out in California for a couple of weeks recently, he came up with something out of the IFOM that when we're learning to do stalls in a Cirrus aircraft, it says no more than 65% power in the POH and everything like that. So when we were doing stalls, he said, hey, it says no less than 65% power in the IFOM. And I was, no, it doesn't say that. It's always been this for stalls in Cirrus aircraft. And we put the airplane on autopilot. We gave the flight controls to me. I was piloting, flying then. He pulls out his cell phone, goes right on the IFOM, and sure enough, he shows me in the IFOM exactly what he was talking about. And then it kind of went into this whole, we started contacting Cirrus, and Cirrus got involved with it. And it was, you know, a really good lesson on a student catching something that I want to say a lot of us had it ingrained in our head from years of doing it one way, and it just 2 words switched in the IFOM, and then it could be completely interpreted another way. And, you know, we got clarification from Cirrus on that. But, you know, having stuff like that where your student brings to your attention that hey, this says it a little bit differently in the IFOM, and, you know, that is interpreted a different way. It was able to start a discussion with us at Palomar Aviation and between Cirrus. And it was actually a really good eye-opener, and we got all on the same page. And yeah, that student that you're talking about that's about to take his check ride, he's really used the Cirrus transition to his advantage, which is great. So there's one last little bit about the Cirrus transition that I'm going to cover, and that's the Cirrus Embark program. So I believe one of our attendees today has just recently purchased a used Cirrus aircraft. And I cannot tell you how amazing the Embark program is. So in order to, you know, become a safe and proficient pilot, and when you buy a new aircraft, you want to fly with an instructor in that airplane. You want to become proficient in it. You want to get some formal training. You can't just hop from this airplane to another one and just hop in and go. You need that instruction. So in order to help, you know, cultivate safe pilots and use Cirrus came up with the Cirrus Embark program. And what that is training Cirrus provides for free. If you purchase a Cirrus aircraft and you've never done a Cirrus transition, they will match you with your local CSIP they will then, for 3 days, cover the expenses of the CSIP. All the airplane expenses and anything else is covered by the owner. And that CSIP will take you through either the advanced transition or the normal VFR transition that that airplane has. And what that does is it promotes the idea of going to a Cirrus standardized instructor pilot to become proficient in that airplane that you're buying. So I've done an Embark program with someone who bought an airplane that was built in 2004. I did an Embark program with someone who bought an airplane that was in 2018. So it covers all generations. It covers the expenses of the CSIP, and it really has made our pilots in the Cirrus world much more safe and proficient flying the used aircraft because they don't have to go and find that CSIP. Cirrus does it for them, and they cover the expenses. I have yet to this day only done 3 days with a student on an Embark program. Cirrus has covered those 3 days, and then the student has wanted to continue. I did 50 hours with a gentleman in his airplane because he just loved the program so much and he liked the training that we did. I recently flew with him a couple weeks ago before the whole mess started, really cracking down, and he knew that airplane inside and out. He knew this was an older generation Avidyne system. He knew those 430s better than I think the engineers from Garmin know 430s now. And he told me that he learned it all off the Cirrus portal. So I do highly encourage you, if you are in the market for used Cirrus, to look up that Embark program because it is free training that Cirrus will provide through a CSIP at your local airport. And I think that is something that I wish other airplane manufacturers would do it, but also I don't, because it just proves that Cirrus is above and beyond anyone else in the general aviation world. But at the end of the day, safety is the game, and that is the number one and most paramount thing that Cirrus Aircraft pushes to us at Cirrus Training Centers and at CSIPs. Safe, proficient pilots come from good, proficient, and safe instructors. So I saw that someone had asked a question. Once you receive your certificate of completion, does it need to be periodically renewed? So the answer is you need to do recurrent training. And there's recurrent training that Cirrus mandates, and there's recurrent training that your local Cirrus Training Center might mandate. I prefer my students, if they haven't flown in every 90 days, to come back and do a flight with us. We'll go do a quick round, and we'll do a flight going over all the maneuvers. So the answer is you want to always stay current in the airplane. The certificate has no expiration date on it, but it then comes down to proficiency, currency, and then also your Cirrus Training Center might have different rules based off of their insurance or anything like that. But I always contact my students every 90 days if they have not flown with us, and I get them into a lesson where we go up and do the maneuvers to, become more proficient and current with those airplanes. And Chuck Callie, who's with Cirrus, just reminded me, so if you don't do your current training, you want to make sure that you do, because the Cirrus Training Center might not be able to accommodate your rental after a year because they want to make sure that you're recurrent you do your recurrent training in the airplane. Every 90 days, I call my students if they haven't flown. Every 6 months, we're going to go up and do some instrument work. My students really do buy into this program. We have a gentleman out in California who's always calling me, trying to get into the plane and do some instrument approaches with him. So the answer is there's no expiration date, just like your license, but if you don't do recurrent training after a year, you're going to have a little bit of trouble getting into a Cirrus aircraft. And if there's anyone else who have any questions, if not, it's about 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. So I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. I think that these are getting some really good attention, and we're learning a lot, and we're starting these great discussions. And I have had a couple people reach out to me outside of these Zoom sessions looking for some more formal instruction. So I do appreciate everyone who's taken the time to become a safer and more proficient pilot. And next Thursday, we're going to have Nick doing a presentation on what to expect on your FAA check ride, which I think is going to be a very good resource for our students like Mike Orlando and anyone else who's looking to add on to their certificate or obtain their first FAA certificate, because it's going to go over what to expect in your oral, what to look for in the ACS, and what to expect on your flight. If anyone else has any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them. If not, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and we'll see you on Thursday when Nick gives his presentation on what to expect in the FAA check ride. Also, PalomarAviation.com, we just updated our schedule for the month of May. I think we're going to have some really great topics to talk about for the duration of May, because we're still talking about some airplane specifics, but we're going to get a little bit more in depth on some other stuff. I think we're going to have this really great presentation on aeronautical decision making, and that's going to be coming up. But check out PalomarAviation.com. We do have our recordings of these Zoom meetings on there, as well as the upcoming schedule. And I just, once again, thanks everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Brian.